Hello and welcome to another episode of R&R's Ask the Expert. I'm Kayla McGowan, editor-in-chief, and today we are discussing the hidden health impacts of indoor air quality. My special guest today is Dr. Iyad. He has 28 years of experience and is a mechanical engineer, air quality consultant, and a visiting academic fellow at the School of Aerospace, Transport, and Manufacturing at Cranfield University for air quality and filter performance relevant to land-based gas turbines. He is passionate about air quality and the impact it has on our everyday lives. Without further ado, please welcome Dr. Iyad.
Hi, Kyle. It's good to be here, and thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for joining me. I know we've been talking for a couple of months now. We wanted to make sure we got on here and really talked about the impact that we have on everyday lives and the work that we do every day. So before we get started, what led you on this journey of 28 years and the passion you have for air quality?
Thank you, Kyle. I think the most important part to highlight here, I got involved in this field in late 90s. My aim was to render our indoor spaces, buildings, and the building envelopes fit to occupy. So at the time, and given the tools that I had and the knowledge that I possessed, I thought the best way to do it is to install the best designed filters for that purpose. I understood early on that application sensitivities is an issue, and we have to understand what kind of pollutants we are up against so that we can appropriately choose or and select air filters. Over the years, I kept on widening the scope and understanding that we may not necessarily possess all the technology that we need in terms of filtration to capture all the pollution that we emit. If we do a quick calculation on the anthropogenic emissions that we have today and calculate the capacity collectively, all the capacity that we possess in terms of air filtration, I doubt that all the filtration will possess in terms of filter media, cartridges, and the supply chain of filter media will probably be able to capture and keep up with the speed, scope, and intensity of our anthropogenic emissions. So I kept on widening the scope until I start asking, why do we pollute so much, and go back and capture what we just polluted. And then until I reach a stage where I'm questioning how we design cities. How are we actually urban planning? Is air quality part of urban planning and city design? Where does air quality land in the architectural design of a building? If we widen the scope, does that impact my design of a city or how I urban plan? And then my final destination so far is indoor air quality and indoor environmental quality governance. If it's not legally binding, how can we move it forward? So this has been my 28 years of journey. And the most important part is I look at my children. I want them to have a bright future worth fighting for. I want to have a cleaner planet. We don't actually own the planet. We just borrowed it from our children and grandchildren, and we have to give it back. So we got to give it back in a way that is fit for a living and dwelling. So this is where I am.
Yeah, and I would definitely say, at the end of the day, our goal should be leaving it better than we found it, right? So that the future generations are able to not only occupy, but have a healthy lifestyle. And, that does evolve around a healthy environment, a clean environment, if you will. And a lot of times when we use the word clean, we think of to the touch or to the look, but everything that we breathe is extremely important as well. And so, when we got to talking, I want us to focus on how we can make a difference, right? Our industry professionals, because to your point, we're not really planning our cities or buildings around necessarily clean air or healthy air. We sometimes come in to do work and the building is kind of set up for failure, if you will, right? And how can we do better? And that starts with planning, but also what can we do now in this day and age, even if the building is not set up properly? How can we as professionals make sure that we're providing a safe space, if you will? So I know we've talked a lot about air pollution and contaminants and we're emitting a ton, but what are we doing to take care of what we've emitted? And this is no different from those who go in and clean up water, fire, mold, all these different scenarios. So what are some of the common indoor air pollutants and their sources that we as industry professionals can encounter during such projects that evolve around water, fire, and mold?
Well, first of all, I think when filtration, comes to mind, the first thing that hover in our brains is dust, particles. And if you ever look at an air handling unit in a building or probably a fan coil unit in a residential place, you'll probably see a very thin, probably 25 mm or an inch depth filter. What does that tell you? It tells you that this filter is there. Its actual function is to protect the equipment and not the human occupants. Although over the years things have improved, but today it's very common to go to a air handling unit and find all the stages there are addressing dust. So dust, which can really range from different particulates. It can be silica dust when we talk about the Arabian Peninsula or Northern Africa. We can have fly ash. We can have cement particles coming out of construction. But we should not neglect bioaerosols and gases. And, I kind of marvel when we talk about clean air, because if we want to promise 8.224 billion people clean air as a human right, I think we may have to define what clean air is. Is clean air polluted air, taken out or filtering out of it pollutants so that it becomes clean air? What are the concentration? How tight and right our performance in terms of air filters will have to be that, and who's going to be the assumed user, who would be able to afford all this filtration to bring that clean air? Are we subsidizing air filtration installation here? There are a number of questions that I think we need to answer. So particles, silica dust, for example, is a very common one, but also we've got gaseous pollutants, NOx and SOx emission. They're major pollutants. H2S is a major pollutant when you are within a refinery area. But also you have bioaerosols that can be an issue. And not to neglect that all is going to depend on first your geographic location. What are you located? And then your filtration, your appropriate filter selection will fall into two, let's say, categories. The first one is the application sensitivity. What kind of application that, you're trying to filter air for? Is it a shopping mall? Is it an IVF in a hospital? Is it a baby room for a newborn? Is it for mom and dad and grandmother and grandfather? We need to know that because that's going to render an impact the kind of air filter media and then air filter design that we're choosing. And then eventually, we need to understand a couple of things. One is the complex exposure of multiple pollutants, one on the respiratory system, and the second one on our equipment. Here we kind of overlook and almost assume and harden this assumption that the only impacted organ in our body is the respiratory system. This is not true because once you inhale PM1 or lower, then you basically subject your entire body to surprises and your health will be compromised. So this is in a nutshell what kind of pollutants. They will vary depending on where you are, the kind of application surrounds your neighborhood. Therefore, we cannot have an over-the-counter one solution, one filtration solution for all air pollution problems.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, sometimes when we're going into these areas that are affected by fire, mold, water, what have you, we're mainly sometimes focusing on that particular area. And unfortunately, those other pollutants or sources can actually affect that project. And so it's really important to understand, just like you said, where you are geographically, what is going on in that particular environment, not just why we're there. And so we do have a huge impact on people's everyday lives. And so that's why it's so important to understand from a different standpoint how we can make a true difference on our side of things. We go into people's homes and businesses every single day, and that means we're impacting their environment every single day in some way, shape, or form. So, speaking of all of this, how can we adapt advanced filtration technologies to improve air quality management in spaces such as commercial, residential, and our common everyday areas? I know we kind of saw some not so good things during the pandemic. And so I kind of wanted to bring that in. And, what did we learn from the pandemic? What did it teach us? And how can we be better, not just in pandemic scenarios, but everyday scenarios?
This is a great question, Kyla. Here there are a couple of things that we need to look at. First is, as I said earlier on, we need to understand the application sensitivity. So this is one. The second is we need to understand what's ailing our application. That's going to require that we do outdoor air pollutant characterization, physical and chemical characterization, a full spectrum, so that I know what I'm up against. Of course, that will involve concentration and particle size distribution to know on which segment or side of things, whether I have more my concentration and size distribution all on the fine particles or somewhere in between. So, having done the outdoor air quality characterization and knowing what you're surrounded by, whether you're nearby a power station or you're potentially near a factory of some sort, and there comes the fact that urban planning, you need to look at the sustainability in locating your application. So, if let's say you're designing a hospital, uh, you probably need to relocate the hospital unless you don't have an option, not just to have the excessive sort of filtration, which in a hospital you would have it in any event. But so we assume that sustainably, from an urban development standpoint, you've done your homework and you have to have your application, your shopping mall, school, hospitals, hotel. Now comes with the diagnosis. I call it the blood work, the x-ray. This is what we do when we get sick. You don't go to the pharmacist and say, I have a headache or I have ulcer, please, help me out to save the cost of the doctor. Once you do blood work for the building, or what you have that, prior to designing and constructing the building, then you pass this on to the filtration experts. And filtration experts will say and determine and make appropriate filter selection based on the types of pollutants. Of course, there are pollutants that will come from the outdoors. There are other indoor pollutants. Eventually, you have to have a holistic look at what would make this building fit to occupy, fit for purpose. You don't want to overshoot too. So, I know a lot of people talk about HEPA filter and ULPA filtration as a reason and a sole line of defense to pandemics. But what if you don't have the particles for it? What if you don't have particles that would require that grade of filtration? So it's important to engineer your filtration needs. Before that, you need to characterize what you're up against. This is the scientific way to do things. You cannot just have a one set of filtration approach, thinking that this is going to work for everyone. Talk a lot about energy efficiency and how we should be, the economics of energy and, how we should be very critical of spending. Overfiltration is also an issue. Underfiltration is usually a more common issue, but certainly what we need to look for is first understand what's ailing you outside, what's coming from the indoors, doing the blood work or the x-rays required, and eventually having an appropriate air filtration selection. And I stress on appropriate because without this, you either have an overshoot or an undershoot.
Yeah, we saw that during the pandemic, right? Which was so unfortunate, but fortunate in so many ways because it's taught us to be better, right? Unfortunate because there we mishandled a lot and we didn't really understand. And so there's positive and negative that came out of that, right? But the positive for us is understanding just exactly what you said, what fits that particular environment, not just indoor, but also surrounding the structure, because that's really important, right? I'm in Las Vegas, and depending on where you are in the valley, you can be next to an energy plant or a water plant. You can be next to the strip. You can be next to the airport. Like we have a very unique lay of the land, which every city does. But to your point, if you're out kind of in the desert, you may not have as many variables stacked against you as you do in the city when you're next to, different types of commercial or industrial buildings, right? So it's really important to take what you said to heart and to understand there is a science behind this. And we as industry professionals do affect the building. And if we don't understand it fully, we could actually leave it worse off than we found it. And that's really what we don't want to do, right?
Yeah, and then the pandemic is, I mean, I keep on going back to the pandemic. I get criticized sometimes for saying this, but I'm not apologetic at all about it. The pandemic, was the litmus test that we failed. I mean, we got invaded by a pandemic that found us doing all the conventional stuff, things and, practices that we have not changed over the past 30 years. Leaky filters, inappropriate filter selection, poor maintenance. We don't really invest on our maintenance crew, especially I would say when it comes to certain countries and certain continents due to limitation of budgets. But we expect so much of them. We expect them to be there, doing their job. No training, no retraining. They don't have the tools. They also don't have the conditions. In certain hot countries which I visited, I mean, it would be very difficult to look at an air handling unit installed in 45 and 48 and 52 degrees. So we need to invest on our maintenance crew. If you really care about your engines, which are the air handling units, then you should be able to do it. But the pandemic came in, and then I think we got into some kind of competition where everybody wanted to come up with a solution very quickly, and everybody wanted to, we kind of need to beat one another to the solution. Oh, I'm the one who first came up with this. I mean, we got really stuck in trying to chase glory during the pandemic. And the only thing I have seen, which I may not be an immediate uh, supporter of, is one, wearing a mask all the time, because that is a declaration that I don't trust my indoor space. I don't trust that office. This is why I'm wearing a mask. Vaccination, which is not really my area to talk about, and I don't want to go for or against. But last but not least, lockdowns. Lockdown basically to me is saying that the city or the municipality ran out of solution, and the only way to do it is to shut down. Now, what does that mean in terms of filtration? I would say not so much. Not so much, because the earlier mistakes we may have made during urban design, designing and constructing a building, collectively with the way we look at filtration and air quality, we didn't really have this widespread air quality monitoring indoors. So how can you assess that you have a poor or optimal air quality if you don't want to invest in indoor air quality monitoring? Now, the counter argument to that could be that they're very expensive and they may not be affordable to everyone. But I would say for places where governments, like hospitals, for example, this should be supported by the government or the hospital. Otherwise, you should not have a permit to run this. Look at schools. How much of tuition would go back to school indoor air quality? We talk about cognitive performance. How soon is the cognitive performance of my children will be impacted? Is it during elementary school? Is it before they get conceived? Is it me? I got impacted. So, I had some sort of a complication in terms of conceiving a baby. So, what happened during the pandemic? I think it revealed a lot of cracks in the system, cracks in filtration, urban development, city design, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. We went back to the drawing board, which is good. A lot, we tweaked a lot of things, but I don't think the pandemic was the best time to go to the drawing board. The pandemic should have had our tools and arsenal of tools ready so that we can respond and not react. And of course, we got into a little bit of competition. Who can do it first? What is the best to do? And it got a little bit noisy. The indoor air quality landscape became very noisy, a lot of conflicting opinions. And, by the time we had to sort things out, it took quite a bit of time. Waves after waves, we lost a lot of, let's say, economic vitality by the time we got things figured out. Okay, the pandemic is over. We're back on track. We rushed into this normality. We wanted to rush into normality very, very quickly. The question that we should ask ourselves today, are we pandemic proof? Is the city that you live in and I live in pandemic proof? Because when I go to conferences, people say over a coffee break, oh, we should be ready for the next pandemic. I reject that notion. We should be pandemic proof because I don't think we can afford having our kids out of school because the school declared that really we cannot have virus prevention or reduce transmission. Are we sorting this out? I don't really know. Are we doing it like, is it widely practiced in all six continents? I don't think so. I think our momentum got, lost its own strength. But I think what we should do right now is make sure that we are pandemic proof. This is what's going to get us going. And this is the fight that we're going to have to keep on winning.
Yeah, and I would definitely say too, to your point, there's a lot of variables that go into this, but we kind of locked ourselves in maybe not so great areas anyway. And I think we saw that where people were getting each other sick, whether they were actually, confining to a space or not, they were still breathing the same air, right? And that's a lot of what we did learn during that time. And then in the cleaning and restoration space, we saw it as well where we were trying to do so much in so little time, there was still cross-contamination happening. And so now we're not just in one building, we're in multiple buildings. We saw it happen on airplanes and hospitals and all of these places. So, everything that we do every single day does affect our air quality. And that's down to the minuscule thing, turning on your stove and making something on your stove, right? I think about that too. I live in Las Vegas. Everything is gas stove. And I think about when you turn on your gas stove and you can still smell it, it's like, wow, what is that doing in my air? Is my filtration system and my HVA system actually capturing those type of particles? Probably not. Which is very interesting to think about the importance of trying to get to that level of pandemic proof, right? It is very important to have that goal in sight because we're able to truly work together and make a difference for that to happen. And you mentioned something about fertility and conception and the cognitive effect on our children, we've seen that indoor air quality does have a huge impact, or just air quality in general does have a huge impact on fertility and having a healthy pregnancy, but also having a healthy baby. What type of impact does poor air quality actually have on fertility and pregnancy and having a healthy child?
Well, this is a great question, and it's no secret that the global fertility globally is declining. This is not just the research that's been done, but it's also been highlighted by the IFFS, the International Federation for Fertility Societies. And I would be very interested to dissect this and look at how much of that is due to poor air quality indoors and outdoors. I know somebody will come and say, well, we spend up to 90% of our time indoors. Well, I can little bit challenge that because if we go to certain continents, some people rely on natural ventilation. So their outdoor air quality equals their indoor air quality. So they're probably also living indoors from an air quality perspective. Now, it is difficult not to believe that all these pollutants are going to impact fertility because, look, we've got wide array of particulate matter. We got several gases floating around. We've got bioaerosols. And even if you go on the most advanced air filtration um, system, take your pick. If it's a hospital or a five-star hotel, you still don't have, I doubt if you would have the best filtration possible fit for that purpose. The second most important point is the fact that your filtration system doesn't really respond to contamination concentration. It doesn't really respond to human occupancy. This is where an air filter need to depart from being just a filter to become a filtration system. Filtration system means it will respond to any variations in indoor air quality. It will respond to potentially if you have contamination, extra contamination. So you have to be adaptive. I don't think this is available right now. It's not impossible. It can be done. But also HVAC systems will have to play a role because filters are part of the HVAC systems. Now, we got two choices here. Either we separate them physically, but integrate them from a system point of view, allowing air filters to have more space, more filter areas so that you can achieve and attain the efficiencies that you require. So when we look at the exposure of particulates, we talked about silica dust, we talked about chemicals. Is this happening indoors or outdoors? Yes, it's impacting fertility. Research has highlighted that in several occasions. What do we need to do? Do we all only expose ourselves to optimal air quality only when we're planning to conceive? We allow this to happen, and then we may think about it only when we find difficulties in conceiving, and then we seek art, assisted reproductive technologies. Part of it is IVF. Again, IVF is a very expensive process, and in some countries, the Ministry of Health may finance the first baby only. In some countries, maybe the first or two baby. Now, what can we do to bring this air quality to perspective? I think what we need to do is first have a research group correlate both indoor environmental quality and fertility, and then make the correlations so we know what to tackle first. If you're located near, or your house is near a refinery, or you suffer from sandstorms or an exhaust of a power station or industrial application, or a combination of both, maybe, or all, I think having an air quality system outdoors and indoors will probably tell you that, this place outdoors is not fit to occupy. Probably from an urban planning point of view, may not have an appropriate decision to actually design a residential place there. The second point is, okay, the building already exists. There is no choice but to render it fit for occupation. This is where you're going to rely heavily on air quality monitoring and air filtration, appropriate air filtration, which should involve bioaerosols, gases, and particulates. So fertility is very important. I think it's overlooked. The medical professionals and the IEQ and filtration professionals are not sitting on the same table. I would love to have them both sit on the same table and then, talk about what can impact fertility. With someone living in near these places that I highlighted, Would that impact the swimming profile of a sperm, the ability to conceive? And it's not just conceiving a baby, it's conceiving a healthy baby because eventually you don't want to have pregnancy complication and the child will have cognitive issues. So certainly this is an interesting area of research. It's also one of my top priorities to look at.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned earlier too, it if it's affecting our fertility, it's also affecting the rest of our body, right? You mentioned that a little bit earlier, and I think it's really important is, we do understand that it has a huge impact on fertility, but what else is it doing to our body or cognitive functionality, maybe even our digestive system, we need to really study that and the effect it has on the human body in totality. But to your point, fertility or conception and bringing in the next generations are down immensely, right? We're not seeing a lot of the younger generation build families, whether it's personal choice or maybe they have had to go a different route. And you did say this, IVF is extremely expensive. And I know some people, their insurance doesn't even cover it. So then they're coming out of pocket, and that's a whole nother, rabbit hole we can go down. But if we can start getting to focus on our air quality and our space, the building envelope, we can help solve some of these things or better understand the effect air quality and some of the things that we do in our everyday life actually do have on our body. It's very interesting to hear, the studies that have been done and where we should take things and having people come to the same table from the restoration, remediation, cleaning, air quality, HVAC professionals coming to the table and trying to figure out how do we make a healthier, sustainable environment, right? We see that with cleaning products and electric vehicles, right? We're taking those steps, but how else can we implement these types of things in our everyday life is really what we should be looking at in the bigger picture of things. So we've talked a lot about the importance of air quality effects that it has, but what are some tools that are required to better understand, assess, manage, and monitor air quality during our work in the field? And what do you suggest? What do you like to see as a professional utilized in work in the field and how we can better understand the effects that we have on the environment?
Well, this is another great question, Kyla. I think the most important part is the characterization part. This is the ideal coordinate to be able to have a scientific approach, what's ailing your indoor environment. But there's a bit of a mistake that we continue on making is we focus only on buildings. We overlook transport because I may get sick from being in a subway or an underground or a bus, being in an airport or being in even in my car. With your own private mobility, you can also get sick. So I think we need to also expand the emphasis, not necessarily shift the emphasis to all the indoor spaces that we've been in. I've been looking at studies that address indoor air quality in train stations, and I was quite happy about it because, yeah, we need to look at that. Now, particulates and contaminants may be different because if you do some sort of mass spectrometry, you'll find that even particles coming out of the braking pads of the subway vehicles will contribute to your challenges. That's not really may not necessarily be specific to a building, but if I leave my home and take the subway and get to work, I can tell you I've got already 3 spaces here, indoor spaces that I need to question. You go to the mall, you pick up your daughter from school, they keep on increasing. So if you put a gadget here on for air quality throughout the day and you kind of uh, uh, get all this data, and this air quality monitor will give you notification if any of the agreed or the metrics that this monitor will measure will exceed the threshold. I don't think, out of the 24 hours, we'll really be exposed to the kind of air quality that we want. So what I would like to see first, we need to uh, uh, do the monitoring. I like to do monitoring on a spatial sort of basis, so not just one monitor in such a wide area. I want to make sure that we have this done widely. But I also like to have some sort of a monitoring on filter performance. So if I have an air handling unit that has 20 filters, I'd like to know which filter is leaking. I'd like to know which filter is not performing because I'm not going to change 20 filters. If I have a building that has 2,000 filters, this is very expensive. So correlating the kind of air quality I have indoors to the air filter performance, then I'll be able to determine, identify, and detect where are the contaminations coming from. You know, I've done a lot of consultancies for various indoor spaces, and sometimes the contamination, part of the contribution of the contamination comes from the loaded filter itself. The filter is, left there for a long time, picks up all kind of pollutants, a lot of dust particles, and eventually, after a while, they start either off-gassing or releasing the particles that were previously captured. We don't have that system right now. I'd love to have it. From a technological point of view, can it be done? Of course it can. But this is the kind of system I'd like to see. We have the technology, we got what it takes. We just need to do it. Cost so much. Okay, let's have it so that it's affordable. Once we have that, we get control over what we're doing. The second will be human occupancy. I would like to predetermine when I design a building, and I know I can get into a little bit of an argument with real estate professionals, but I'd like to predetermine what are you going to use this indoor space for? If it's going to be a gymnasium, the approach of your HVAC and filtration is going to differ. If it's going to be a school where the proximity is going to be an issue, I'm sure all of the above will change. So I cannot steer perspective and tweak filtration if I have a building, 10 floors, all have the same HVAC system with the same filtration. We need to make sure that these solutions are sensitive. The pandemic kind of served us right, that we start to say, oh, I'm getting sick when I go to the gym, or I get sick if I go to the dental office. Is it a filtration issue, or is it a ventilation issue, or is it a combination of both? How are we going to make that decision if we don't have the data? Now, what we could also, I would like to do, or I'd like to see done, is to have so-called pollution profile of an individual. If you live in a house that has 5 people, mom, dad, and 3 kids, maybe the husband works in a refinery, so at 4 o'clock, when he arrives home, he brings a specific pollutant. With artificial intelligence, you'll probably be able to detect that within that time, your pollution will increase within that level, by that concentration, by that contaminant. There are great things that we can do. And, I'm not gonna blame my father and grandfather or my grandparents for not doing this before because they did not possess that. But I think what I'd like to see that now, it's the technology. If we can get innovation to, turn on a light when I arrive to the driveway, or I have a smartwatch, I think we should do that too. So the air filter performance and linking this and correlating it to indoor air quality and how this system should respond to any variations in contaminant levels, if you have human occupancy, whether you have to ventilate or filter or do a bit of both, then this is certainly something that we should be able to deploy.
Yeah, and I would definitely say to your point, talking you used a great scenario of the father coming home and it affecting their environment. That's kind of what we should be monitoring when we're going into somebody's home or business and we're bringing in our equipment and our people and we're there to restore or remediate or clean an area. We should also monitor and make sure that we're not adding any pollutants or contaminants into their space as well, right? And you had a great example when you talked about something that had 20 filters, right? Where's the failure? It'd be nice to know which filter, or if it wasn't a filter that was having a problem, in that space. And that's no different than what we do, right? We use a lot of air movers, dehumidifiers, we use HEPA filters, as you mentioned. If it were failing, we would want to know that, right? Um, and to have a monitoring system would make our jobs so much easier, and it also save us time, right? To understand, oh, this isn't working. We shouldn't bring this into somebody's home or business or a hospital or a mall. We should actually pull this or replace something to make sure that we're not contributing in a negative way to the air quality of such area, right?
Exactly. And also we need to look at two things. I mean, let's put it in perspective. Let's look at school, for example. Um, if you register your children in a school, what is the selection criteria for, that school? Is it going to be the number of students per teacher, or is it how close is it to your home, the proximity? What I think should be done is indoor air quality, continuous indoor air quality monitoring, reliable, affordable, and of course, you need to make sure that you understand the data. You need to have a reliable data so that tells you the truth and nothing but the truth. Once you have that, my proposal is to have IAQ/IEQ governance. What does that mean? That means that this data is automatically shared if you're a school with the Ministry of Education, if you're a hospital with the Ministry of Health. And then if you don't, pass the IAQ test or the indoor air quality test, the authorities will know about it. And that's going to give you several platforms to collaborate. If you do it, we renew your license, you're great. If you do it very well, you get rewarded. So if you took a loan to improve your air quality through appropriate filtration, tweaking your HVAC systems, reducing the number of students within the class so that you make sure that you engineer that with the HVAC professionals and the architects having or knowing what is the optimal number of students depending on the breathing pattern. And of course, there are standards for that selection. So you do that, and then, if you cannot afford it and you went to the bank to get it, and we have that governance and a program that would help you to do it, one of the incentives could be that you are, getting a waive of the entire loan, or, you get a tax credit, or you get some sort of an award that you would compete to do it. I think we lack these incentives right now. The I'd like to see it legally binding, but legally binding only kind of misses the mark. We need to make it, sound and appear and come across as something that we need to do. But if we put our heart into it, we will get rewarded, and I would like to draft that governance program through tax credits, interest-free loans, and all the kind of incentives that will get you to do it. If you don't do it, frankly, if I'm a mayor of a city, I will not allow this school to subject the students, whether they're mine or not, to poor air quality. Because after this, they will come back and become my responsibility when they get sick as a Ministry of Health, and the government will inherit the responsibility, and then I have to treat them. I lose productivity. They don't really contribute to the society. So it's important to also look at this segment, like what is the health and well-being? Are these the kind of denominator that will make me urban plan? What is sustainable urban development if it does not have health and well-being beating in the heart of its core definition?
Yeah, those are all really great points. And I think that if we do something like this, or when we do something like this, it will affect every single thing that we do as far as personal and professional, right? It will also set standards across other industries, not just schools and hospitals, but maybe even into homes. And then you have people who come in and like restoration and cleaning professionals, they go into people's spaces. They too could be part of a program where they're rewarded for, making a difference in that environment, making it a healthy environment and a sustainable environment based on the products, the methods that they're utilizing, so that they're actually contributing to still a safe and healthy environment, right? So I think that it's not just about this, it's a great place to start, but I think we could see it ripple into other industries and professions so that everybody has a high expectation of healthy air, right?
Exactly. And I go back to the application sensitivities. I mean, how safe are our airports, for example? How safe are our schools? If I go to a shopping mall and I get sick, whose responsibility is this? Maybe hard to track, but how can shopping malls not have an indoor air quality monitoring? How can it not be a metric? And when I say that, some people say, well, it's not a law. I said, yes, well, first let's make it legally binding, but it's also a nice commercial thing to talk about because if you're a shopping mall and your air quality is something to celebrate, you showcase that. If I have when I had my daughter, she was born 7 months old, so I wasn't able to take her to a shopping mall, just at least to get, or if I have my grandmother who's, got an ailing respiratory system, because I don't want to, I don't want her to get sick from an indoor space that neglects air quality, indoor air quality. But if that becomes a metric, it becomes something to celebrate. And if you do it well, why not showcase it? I mean, if you go to a hotel and your AC doesn't work, you call the maintenance to fix the AC so that your temperature is a metric. But can you call them if you cough? Is coughing an issue? No. Is temperature an issue? This is something that we would say yes to. So I think what we also need to look at is for those cities that are now urbanizing, I tell them, look, you are an ideal coordinates to embed air quality from day one of your city planning and urban design. But if you already got a city, you need to go back and say, I need to make sure that, I get air quality. How much filtration should I involve? And what is my HVAC system going to be like to be able to deliver this? Uh, we have a lot of standards today. A lot of standards have been tweaked, which is a good thing. So now we've got the tools in that department to better design how our HVAC systems and from an architectural point of view, how a building should be designed. But also we need to look at what is not specific to filtration and what is specific to filtration. There are other topics that are not filtration specific. Could be the material you use within an indoor space, whether it's a hospital or within a hotel or a school. So this is something that we need to do. So if you really go and say, I want to have school, there has to be a clear code for air quality and indoor environmental quality, how to go by it. Uh, we've seen in the pandemic, going back to the pandemic, we got hit so hard, so fast. So, we try to achieve something quick to go back to that normality thing. And, the reason why I think we didn't achieve much because we were mentally everywhere, but strategically nowhere. And we ended up, trying back and forth, kind of hit and miss. And, we ended up having a very poor reaction. What we need to do is go back, re-envision what is fit to occupy built environment. This is the kind of fight we have to keep on winning.
Yeah, well said. I also think that it's never too late to learn from something that's already happened, right? That's the other thing is you bring up the pandemic and I think we all still bring it up because it's very memorable. I think in the next 10, 20 years we're still going to talk about it because it really did test our mentality and I think you said it best, mentally we were everywhere, but strategically we hadn't made any moves because we were in a state of reactiveness instead of us being proactive and prepared. And so what can we learn from that and apply now moving forward? And I think you've talked about quite a few things, coming up with a way to, you know, govern this and make it a standard, if you will, right? To your point, a hotel, if your air conditioning doesn't work or you don't have towels, you're calling to complain. But if your nose starts to itch and you cough, you're not going to call them and say, "Hey, my nose is itching, can you help me? Hey, I'm coughing. Why am I coughing?" Because it's not monitored. It's not something they can help you with, but hopefully we can get to that point one day, right?
Yeah, and I've been doing a lot of lectures recently, and The last one was in a hotel, and I've asked whether the air quality, optimal air quality, should be the first star in the star rating in a hotel or the additional star. I mean, when you say this is a three-star hotel, and if it's the first star, that means even if I get into a two-star hotel, you should at least give me a safe place to stay. If we say this is a six-star and the additional six-star is the air quality, that means, I would always have to be in six-star hotel to have a protection. Again, what do we use when we select a hotel room or we're really driven by a price, maybe a location, the number of stay, the kind of packages they have. But have we ever wondered that, oh, how's the air quality there? Because I have a newborn, or I'm going to take my grandmother. She's so sick, I mean, what am I going to do? What if she gets sick from there? Again, what if I have a newborn, we go to the airport, and my baby gets sick from the airport terminals, from the lounge, from the counter where we do the check-in? Are we really monitoring all of this? You get sick, then you don't know where you got sick from. We need to understand that. I think technology will be able to reveal this. It's going to make air quality monitors affordable, so almost most of us can have it. But what's really important is, as you said, not to over or neglect the pandemic. We have to keep, learning from the pandemic, because the pandemic happened in 2019. It didn't happen in 1960 or 1920, like the Spanish flu. The tools, the kind of technologies that we possessed in 2019, I think should have had given us a lot of preparation to better respond. The fact that we didn't, it meant, and I think now it's a positive thing to highlight, it helped bridge the gap between medical professionals and those that are in the indoor environmental quality, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, filtration, to come and say, look, we have to pay attention to these metrics. And then the medical doctors will come and say, yes. But then the architects will come and say, well, I can't do that. You have a school, you put 40 students, the HVAC system and the filtration is not going to keep up, you know, because when you address filtration, also you need to look at the filter media type. Is this going to be hydrophobic? Are you going to go for a progressive structure because the concentration is so high? Or you have gaseous pollutants where you need to bring some sort of absorbent somewhere? And what are the effectiveness? Like slapping filters that are, chemical or for particulates only without really having a way to characterize and assess their performance is job half done. So we need to go back and get things in perspective. I believe we've got enough tools today to reveal the truth. Again, we have air quality monitors. We need to make sure we interpret the data, not just getting the data that are reliable, but make sure we understand what is the data and what can we use it for, and eventually correlate it to identification of the sources and how can we tweak filtration, heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems to better serve the human occupants. Technologies are there to serve us. We're not there to serve the technology.
Yeah, we need that technical side of things, right? And technology and analytics do help us, but the technology is not the main forefront of this ultimate goal to have a healthy space, right? We drive it as people. Because one day there will be a time, I mean, when technology doesn't work the way it's supposed to, or the internet's down, right? I think we see how it affects life now. We can't rely on technology. It's great to have it, let's utilize it and leverage it. But also at the end of the day, we need people like yourself who have the knowledge or know who to reach out to help with our everyday structure and indoor air quality.
And Kyla, it's also important to admit we don't have all the solutions for every single indoor air quality problem. I think this is the ego issue we had during the pandemic. We could not say we don't have the solution. No, 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 we can't do it. We're going to do it fast. Everybody thought in a couple of months we're going to be out. We have not been. So we need to admit we don't have all the solutions. We have knowledge gaps that we need to bridge. We have knowledge gaps across or cross fields between aerosol monitoring and filtration, between aerosol monitoring, filtration, and the medical field, between the architectural engineering part and all these fields. you know, we relied on impulse. Impulse gives you speed, but we didn't rely so much on insights. Insights would have given us strategy, but we may have gotten out a lot faster. I'm not saying impulse is not good. I'm just saying that success lies somewhere in between. But again, as I said, and I agree with you, the pandemic is something that we have to keep on learning. And it's not a matter of having several standards, because what if we have excellent standards and the implementation is poor? If they're poorly implemented, poorly understood, we're going to end up with the same result, because people are not just going to understand the value of these standards. Also, one final point I'd like to make: you can change all the technology in the world and bring it forward and make it affordable and accessible, but eventually we're going to need a major change, and that is social change. How do we decide to interact with our buildings, with ourselves? How do we protect our building and school and hospital? How we address facility aging. Accelerated facility aging is something that we need to pay attention to. You get a building, it's operating beautiful today, but within a couple of years, you'll find that a lot of degradation in terms of heating, ventilation, air conditioning. You're replacing filters frequently. You have contamination on the coil, on the diffusers, on the ducts, on the furniture, on the human occupants. Eventually, we inhale them. How can we celebrate something like this? We need a continuous monitoring system that will safeguard, that will be able to respond, protect us when there's any of these contaminants or any of these metrics that we pre-agree on with the designers, with the architects, with the filtration and HVAC systems. Once they pass the threshold, we should be immediately notified, but for the system itself to take instant and intelligent action to protect families and all the human occupants that may exist in the building.
Yeah, well said. Nice way to close too, right? It's just setting the bar for where we need to be, not just now, but in the future, right? We're always going to continue to innovate and learn, but I think the most important thing is putting these things into action. I know you're working on a lot of things, and my challenge to the industry and everybody listening would be, hey, find out how you can get involved, right? How can we continue to make a difference? We affect the environment in one way, shape, or form, no matter what we're doing, how we're helping people. We affect our own homes. And that should really be important to everybody as well, right? Man, I'm actually affecting the quality of the air in my home, and I'm actually maybe making my family sick based on what I'm bringing into my home. So thank you so much, Dr. Iyad. I really appreciate it. I look forward to talking to you soon. And for everybody watching, thank you for listening. Take care, and we will see you on the next episode of Ask the Expert.